we've seen some evidence in certain other countries that there's a time frame at which the peaks will happen and then recede. Do you feel as though the U.S. is on that same path?
You know, Dom, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen with this virus. But if we look at what has happened in other places like India, like the UK with the Delta variant, we may very well see this huge peak, which we're currently on the upswing right now, and then a rapid decline. And if you look at this and you put it in perspective, you could potentially predict that in 6 to 8 weeks, the Delta variant peak will be gone.
So if that is the case, and we do have jurisdictions like New York City imposing what are, in essence, vaccination passports for doing certain things like dining indoors or going to a show, do you feel as though policy is perhaps a step behind what's happening right now, or is it all just out of an abundance of caution because we don't exactly know what the Delta variant is going to do?
Well, you know, we have Delta, but then we have Lambda and we'll have other variants come. So the reality is the pandemic is not over, and it will not be over until we control it globally. So I think New York is taking what I think is a very smart decision. The reality is, if, you know, knowing that people are vaccinated and allowing people vaccinated more ability, more freedoms to do things will probably be the right thing to do going forward, and something we're going to see in many places around the world. France has already done this at a national scale.
There's been a lot of talk about this notion that we might need further vaccines, possibly on a more regular basis, to kind of keep this thing in check. I think to myself, you know, Dr. Del Rio, that I get a flu vaccine every season as just part of my normal routine. Is this a situation where, because of COVID and future variants, that people will have to get vaccines on a regular, perhaps even annual basis because of the different types of variants that will develop over the course of the next several years?
You know, Dom, it's hard to predict again, but the flu virus and the COVID virus are very different. The way they mutate, the way they change is very different. So I don't think we're going to need annual boosters like you do with the flu. You may need a supplemental or some additional vaccination once in a while, but annually, I strongly don't think that's going to be the case. It may also be that the companies who are developing vaccines, they're already working on what they call a pan-coronavirus vaccine. So it'll be sort of one vaccine that covers all current and future variants of COVID-19. And that may be actually the way we may see things going forward.
How safe should Americans feel about getting, you know, back to normal, more so than they already are right now? We have New York City announcing these new restrictions. Should we feel as though we have to go back to the types of lockdowns or restrictions that we've seen? We've heard Dr. Fauci say that we're not going to go through lockdowns, that's a last case, that's a worst case scenario. Is the lockdown scenario pretty much off the table, given the fact that vaccinations are on the current trajectory that they are on?
Yeah, exactly. That's the case. I think that because of vaccinations, lockdowns are off the table, but we have to get more people vaccinated. The reality is, you know, there's still about close to 100 million Americans who are eligible for vaccination today and are currently not vaccinated. And we have to get more people vaccinated. If you look at places that have high vaccination rate, you have not a lot of problem with Delta. If you look at places like in the southern U.S., Florida and other places, where you have lower vaccination rates, you have very high surges in Delta. So there's a very strong correlation. And what companies and the government and many other people are doing is trying to get people vaccinated. And some companies are doing it by mandates, others are doing it by making it easier. But at the end of the day, getting more people vaccinated is going to be key.
Doctor, before we let you go, you mentioned the number of Americans who are not yet vaccinated. In your medical opinion, if those people do not get vaccinated or choose not to get vaccinated going forward, what does this country face in terms of the trajectory of this particular virus and future variants?
Well, if you don't find a vaccine, Delta will find you. You will get infected with Delta very likely. And therefore, those people are going to become infected and they're going to become immune by natural infection, many of them. The problem of that approach is that a lot of people are also going to be hospitalized and sick. We see what's happening in many places right now where hospitals are overwhelmed. And I want to remind people that when hospitals are overwhelmed with COVID patients, that also impacts patients that have heart attacks and strokes and many other conditions that simply cannot get the care they need. So at the end of the day, you don't want hospitals overwhelmed. And that to me is the biggest concern, is simply our hospital capacity overwhelmed, mortality up, and a lot of pain and suffering for everybody as we go through this surge.